Hello and welcome to Wider View from Brussels. My name is Marcin Zaborowski and I am the host of the show. Last week in Davos, we witnessed some dramatic disagreements, arguments amongst the transatlantic allies. Responding to President Trump's threats against Greenland, his weaponization of trade relations, a number of European leaders and the Canadian Prime Minister came out calling for diversifying away from America. But how is it meant to work in practice? Are the Europeans able to defend themselves against Russia or other threats? Should the Europeans seek closer relations with other major powers such as India, Latin American states or even China as alternative to their dependence on the United States? We shall discuss all these issues shortly. Please stay with us. To discuss what it means for Europe, what it means for transatlantic relations, I'm joined here in the studio in Brussels by two insiders from Brussels, Garvan Walshe, the co-founder of Article 7, and Joe Burns from the Telegraph, Europe Correspondent. Okay, gentlemen, as you know, we will be talking about what actually happened in Davos. Let's just start with a little soundbite from the Belgian Prime Minister, Bart de Wever.
Being a happy vassal is one thing, being a miserable slave is something else. If you back down, you're going to lose your dignity.
Well, these are really strong words. And now the question is to perhaps you, Garvan. You work closely with European policymakers. You follow the news on the matter. There was this article by Gideon Rahman in the Financial Times, which had this, I think, very meaningful title: "The world is hedging against Trump's America." Is it really what you are seeing here in Brussels? Is it just rhetoric, or are we looking at the beginning of some very serious action here?
I mean, first of all, Bart de Wever seems to have discovered a spine since the episode with the Russian assets, when he went to Beaux-Arts, a sort of art centre here in Brussels, and was absolutely terrified that the Russians might do something to them. He seems to be able to stand up to Trump more than he can stand up to Putin. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think this is the moment where there used to be three poles in the European debate. There were the Gaullists who said, look, we've got to do everything on our own. There was a kind of middle group that said, well, Trump is a problem, but we can work with Congress, we can work with NATO, we can keep the Transatlantic Alliance going. And then there was a third group that kind of said, well, actually, we can find ways to do with Trump, we can do deals with him, we can be transactional, and that's going to work out. And what the Greenland has showed is that the third option, this transactional Trumpism option, is now completely unviable. They've realized that he's threatened European Union territory. They've realized that mutual dependence makes things difficult, but nevertheless, that dependence is more mutual than we remember. You know, Denmark, of all things, makes large proportions of the F-35 fighter. They need us as well as we need them.
Thank you. Now, Joe, you cover obviously both British and European news. And you work for the Telegraph, which is covering a lot of the conservative opinions also. So the question here is whether in your view, whether the conservatives are seeing what is happening what happened in Davos in the same way as Garvan has just described, or do they tend to see it as overreaction? It's too much panic, and that we pay too much attention into Trump's words, really, rather than his action?
You speak to conservatives in the UK, and they will kind of support Donald Trump's worldviews in terms of like Walshe power centres, regional powers, going after Iran, etc. But Donald Trump doesn't represent a lot of British conservatives. For example, his comments about did European and Canadian NATO allies fight alongside American troops in Afghanistan, or did they hide away from the front lines? Mm-hmm. That actually generated, those comments from Donald Trump where he suggested that Europeans didn't fight alongside Americans, generated a lot of hatred for the US president. There was Nigel Farage, there was the Conservative Party, there was the Labour Party, who all came out with a solid message saying, no, Britain, who lost 457 men and women in Afghanistan, were fighting on the front lines alongside Danes, who lost, I think, the most soldiers per capita behind America. Poles, I think there was 47 Polish men and women killed in Afghanistan. There was, I think, 150 odd Canadians, 90 French soldiers. So it's words like this which do drive a wedge in the transatlantic relationship. Is the reaction in Britain going to be the same as we see in Europe in terms of let's sort of push towards this strategic autonomy? I don't think so. Britain is trying to hedge its bets. It wants to be that strong partner for America, that special relationship we always talk about, but it also wants to be in the European fold and sort of act as that bridge between Washington and Brussels. Can it do that? Maybe not, but I don't think we're going to see a dramatic shift, whether it be from the Labour Party, the Conservatives, or Nigel Farage's reform on how Britain positions itself in between the US and Europe.
How about the Green Party?
The Green Party have their own set of interests, I think.
Which, by the way, I understand it's polling very well.
Yeah, incredibly well. They're in some polls, they might even be topping the Labour Party. But the Greens have a very interesting worldview, which is one that isn't sort of Labour's Clement Attlee view of NATO, of a strong transatlantic alliance. It's not the one that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party support in terms of being nuclear powers. I think Zach Palensky, the Green Party's sort of charismatic leader who is he's helping them poll this well, came out and said we should probably look at a unilateral disbanding of our nuclear deterrent because it does rely on American equipment, it does rely on American intelligence, and he doesn't believe in sort of NATO. He's that left-wing thinker who doesn't believe in military power, doesn't believe in that as a form of deterrence to stop the likes of Russia and China attacking us. He believes in sort of world peace, which is probably an ideal that doesn't really have any real world.
Okay, let me, but that's fascinating stuff about British politics. It looks like that is going to look very, very different in the years to come. I wanted to move to another item here, which is and play a soundbite from the Canadian Prime Minister.
Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure and coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.
So, Joe, let me start from you here. Let's talk a little bit about de-risking from the United States. Is it desirable? Is it feasible? Your views on that, please.
Well, de-risking was a phrase that we first heard in the context of European economies and China. Now we're hearing it in the context of America, which is our closest ally, whether we like Donald Trump or not. Can it be done? I think after what we've seen in Davos this week, we've heard for a long time the need for strategic autonomy. Emmanuel Macron, France's president, has been this great supporter of the idea that Europe, with probably a de Gaulleist side in him, can be independent from the US. But I don't think we've ever seen a push, a genuine sort of mindset where people think actually we're going to need to be independent of America. And this includes the Canadians as well, because of various reasons. But actually Davos, I think, has been that moment where we are actually seeing maybe people thinking we need to go. Can it be done? I think in 2022, when Vladimir Putin sanctioned his invasion of Ukraine, it was a wake-up call for Europe in terms of buying cheap fossil fuels from Russia. That dried up. We are now huge purchasers of fossil fuels, gas mainly, liquefied natural gas, from America. So that's just one dependence to another. The US is still Europe's biggest trading partner, even though Donald Trump loves the word tariffs, and he will slap tariffs on anyone that disagrees with him. There's a 15% blanket tariff on EU trade with the US. He has dropped that tariff to the 8 countries on Greenland, but ultimately tariffs are his thing.
And then there is, of course, the question of defense. And let me just turn to Garvan here. Garvan has worked on security and defense for a number of years. So how do you think this is feasible, that Europe can militarily become independent of the United States?
I mean, first of all, we need to distinguish between the United States and the Trump administration. There's a Trump
We still have 3 years to go.
Yeah, but even though it may have 3 years to go of the Trump administration is not all powerful on this. There was also the National Defense Authorization Act passed over his veto that ensured a number of things, including U.S. troop presences in Europe, a Baltic security initiative, and continued transatlantic cooperation. The Republican Party doesn't want to challenge Trump on many things, but it does want to see that there continues to be transatlantic cooperation. The U.S. defense industry here is quite relevant. They've seen hits to their sales. The F-35, for example, is much less popular than it used to be, and not just because it's a very expensive plane, but also because people are worried about the U.S. dependence now. It's much harder for them to sell their very good equipment to Europe in these kind of circumstances. These kind of things affect strategic calculations. So can Europe de-risk from the Trump administration? I think it probably can. Should it de-risk from the United States in general? I think it's too early to make that decision. That really depends how things work out in the next few years. Is the Trump administration going to be a kind of one-off blip because there's this particularly strange, unstable leader of the United States? Or is it really a structural shift in American politics? Is MAGA going to be a permanent feature of American politics? And if it is, then Europe is going to have to work out how to be more autonomous.
Garvan, but the issue here is whether Europe actually, it's not just about political will, whether it can materially do that. It's
a matter of time. I mean, there are three things that, maybe four things that we have key gaps compared to the United States. The first one is what is known as suppression of enemy air defense capability. This is when you start fighting a war, what you need to do is you destroy their air defense and try and take air superiority. That's how Western armies and militaries fight. The second thing is got to do with satellite intelligence. We're making significant progress on that. Macron himself said that 63% or so of Ukrainian intelligence targeting is now supplied by the French. Another chunk is supplied by the British, though the capability is still not fully there to replace the Americans. The third area is anti-ballistic missile defense, where, again, progress is being made. There's new systems that are coming on stream, not yet at scale, but of similar capability to the Patriot. These are things Europe can do. The big gap, of course, that's much more controversial, is nuclear weapons. Exactly. What happens here? Particularly not strategic nuclear weapons, because France and Britain can threaten the destruction of the planet to stop Russia threatening its own destruction of us. But what matters here are these tactical nuclear weapons, where the Russian doctrine says that if they're facing defeat on the battlefield, they will then have to threaten or possibly use these smaller scale nuclear weapons that would allow maybe obliterate a battalion or a carrier group, but wouldn't destroy a whole city. We don't have the obvious symmetrical ability to counter-escalate there. At the moment, we could threaten complete destruction of the world, but they would be willing to bet that we wouldn't do that just to save a military formation. So we need to think about how to develop our own tactical nuclear weapons. The best way to do that is probably to adapt the French program, because of its different warheads and its ability to be launched from aircraft as well as launched from submarines.
Can you imagine the UK adopting the, shading its dependence on the United States and switching to work closer with France?
No, I think the British institution, whether it be sort of the civil service, the military, can't countenance the unthinkable, which is a complete separation with the UK and the Americans on a defence and security partnership. It's been the case for the World Wars, for since then Cold War, NATO, you name it. If you ask someone inside the system, are you ready to do this? Do you think they would go, no, absolutely not. The special relationship is as strong as it's ever been. and it's unbreakable. It's
Are they really still saying it's as strong as it ever been? I mean, that's clearly not true. They could say it could be revived, it could be improved, but to say it's strong as ever been is just false.
I think what you have to do is you have to break down what's actually happening and then the institutionalised thinking that is ingrained in the British system that you will never be able to shift. And that is what people are probably having to do, but I think it's the unthinkable that Britain would have to defend itself without America one day. That is an unthinkable notion for many politicians, many civil servants.
Do you agree with that? Well, it was unthinkable, but, the world has been changing pretty fast, and they better start thinking it.
Well, gentlemen, let's move to another issue, which is about technological dependence on the United States. And especially, I want to talk a little bit about AI technology here, and let's play a soundbite, which is also from Davos, and it's the CEO of Mistral, Mr. Arthur Mensch.
The biggest risk in the coming years for Europe is that we become a colony in AI, which could lead to 95% of digital services and AI being imported from the US. That would present a profound risk to European sovereignty, because our entire industry will be run on a technology that can be turned off if the US decides to.
Joe, let me just start with you this time around. There's a potential tension here between what is the technological supremacy and the needs and the consumer needs, really.
So
is it because we may want to, for political reasons, to de-risk and minimize that dependence from the United States, but will our consumers not suffer from that?
Well, I think the easiest way to look at this is what would the reaction be to a British voter, a European voter, if the politicians here took the decision to turn off Netflix, an American product that is beamed into millions and millions of homes in the UK and Europe, which is ultimately something that we use every day without thinking about the politics around it, whether it's American, whether it's Chinese or whatnot. It's when you start taking decisions like that. I think there's a system called AWS, which is an Amazon product, where I have no idea the numbers. I'm not a tech expert by any means, but that is the cloud software that a number of really important websites that we rely on a day-to-day basis is run off of. When that's gone down in the past, you only have to turn to social media, if that's still running, and you see the uproar. Imagine if a British or European politician took the decision to turn off a bit of software because of the political row going on. There is going to be a repercussion for voters that ultimately put them in power. So that reliance is going to be a difficult one to shift as well.
Garvan, there might be a little bit of an issue here of replacing a little bit like in defense industry, replacing dependence on the US technology with the dependence on the French technology. Is it not what we are talking about here?
I mean, obviously, look, I've got an AI startup here. We use AI every day. We use it to help write our code. We build, machine learning models for media purposes. But so on the one hand, the Mistral guy is talking his own book. He wants to say, look, well, I'm a safe European AI provider. Don't buy my competition because Trump might turn them off. So that's obvious. Okay, that's obvious. Like he's promoting his own business. That's fine. That said, for example, I run one of Mistral's models locally. They have a different model. They think, whereas the people like OpenAI think we've got a big centralized AI kind of plants and data centers, and you have these expensive data centers, and then you call out to them from your computer and you get results back. Mistral's model is very much, let's build small models in people's computers. Those local computers are now getting much more powerful. It's a different way of looking at it. It's much closer to the way the Chinese are doing their AI as well, because essentially the American companies have had so much capital they haven't had to be efficient, whereas the French and the Chinese companies have had to learn to be more clever, and as a result are being able to push the hardware that much further. So there is a risk that if we get too dependent just on these particular American products, we would end up being dependent in that way and things could get shut off. But in practice, these things are pretty interoperable. You can actually switch from OpenAI to DeepSeek to Mistral if you need to. There are capacity questions. The Americans are still bigger capacity. The real dependence here is in the microchips. We don't in Europe have microchip manufacturing capacity. That's all in Taiwan. The Americans are trying to build some in Arizona. I think we're trying to do some in Lithuania. But that's really where the bottleneck is, rather than the AI models themselves that are essentially a commodity and can be swapped in and out by different engineers. One last thing on AWS, just a technical point. What would happen there is AWS has its data centers in Europe just as it has in the United States. You can think of them more like banks. They'd get nationalized in the event of a conflict rather than turned off. But then the question then is, do we have the people who can actually maintain them? That's the real skill set in maintaining these things at scale. There are people in the US who can do it. There are people in Ireland who can do it. But whether there are people all around Europe that can do that is a very, very big open question.
Gentlemen, very, very briefly now on the question of the Board of Peace. Another one of the fancy Trumpist idea. We really are coming to the end of our time, so we don't have enough to really talk in depth about it. But do you think that this is something which could bring peace to Ukraine, for example? Is it at all workable? And Garvan, can you think about it, whether Trump is thinking about the replacement for United Nations?
Trump is thinking about that. He's thinking about some grandiose things. I mean, look at the people on it. They're not known peacemakers. Perhaps the Dutch could offer to host them in The Hague. I think they'd find sumptuous accommodation there. I don't think we should take the Board of Peace that seriously. We should take the Gaza Executive Board that seriously, because they're trying to do something. The Gulf powers are very much involved, and they want to see some practical solution coming out there. But the overall Board of Peace is one of those symbolic things, like the FIFA Peace Prize. It's a kind of boondoggle, and we shouldn't be distracted about it. We should look at the situation on the front in Ukraine. We should look at the military moves that are happening in the Western Hemisphere, whether it's Venezuela. We should look at the fact that carrier groups are being sent to Iran. These are the things that really matter. The Board of Peace is a distraction.
Joe?
Yeah, completely tokenistic for me. Trump, by all means, is trying to bring an end to Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. He is praised by a number of European leaders that he is doing so. If you speak to the Americans involved and some who sit on the Board of Peace, they are confident they can do so. But that is down to Vladimir Putin, who invaded Ukraine, who Western intelligence communities, including on the record, I think the head of MI6 said, we don't believe that he is ready to end the war yet. He sits on the Board of Peace, or wants to sit on the Board of Peace. What kind of message does that send to a genuine idea of a Board of Peace when you've got the man who single-handedly launched the biggest land war since the Second World War in Europe on a Board of Peace? I don't know.
Just super briefly, do you think that Poland should join, for example, the Board of Peace? No. Okay, you agree?
I am not a Polish politician. I know.
No, but I like.
If Donald Tusk wants to sit on the Board of Peace and has $1 billion to stump up for such a privilege, by all means, he's a sovereign leader.
Okay, thank you, guys. I think we covered a lot of ground. Just as a goodbye way of closing it up. 10 seconds on. Do you think that this Davos in 2026, is the beginning of something new when we look at it in, let's say, 5-10 years' time? Is it this watershed moment, or this is just a storm in a teacup?
It's somewhere in between the two. Like, it's the start of the final acknowledgement that there's something seriously wrong in the transatlantic relationship, and that if it's not fixed, it's going to lead to a rupture.
Thank you. Joe?
It's the start of something, but I think now is what we have to look at, is whether the politicians have the guts and the political will to push through with what they're saying.
Thank you, gentlemen. So that was Garvan Walshe of Article 7 and Joe Burns from the Telegraph, correspondent for Brussels. Thank you for watching us at The Wider View.